Three, two, one. Welcome back to the Extra Points podcast. I'm your host, Peyton Harmon. Once again, we had another very, very exciting week with college football. We're going to be going over games like Duke versus Louisville, Clemson versus NC State, and how USC's defense once again looked absolutely terrible. But today I have a very special guest with me. I've heard around the building he is known as the football guru of the school. He's also not only a football guru, but the band director for our Montgomery marching band. Mr. Trey Fox, it's very nice to have you today. How you doing?
Thanks, mate. I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
That's great to hear. So I just want to ask you, where did you get your love from football from?
I would say probably from my dad. As a kid, like I grew up, my dad was a football coach growing up. So from the time I was 5 years old, I played football. And he went to Penn State as well, and so did I. But his like passion for Penn State football made me like really interested in watching football. So like from the time I was in elementary school, like I was following college football, NFL football, high school football, all of that. So he's a big influence on that, and also the reason why I played football as long as I did up through high school.
What position did you play?
I played fullback for a while, but before I played fullback, I played tight end. But fullback was kind of where I ended up as like a like pass protection, third down back sometimes.
Yeah, so like most of us listening to this show, you grew up playing football, you love it,
Yeah,
and you love talking about it just as much as I do.
absolutely for sure.
All right, so let's get straight into this. We're going to start off Duke versus Louisville. Duke getting shut out by Louisville. I just want to say this was a dominance performance by the Cardinals. Not only that, the Duke offense had nothing going on for them. What do you think about this?
I was honestly shocked because Duke at the beginning of the year like kind of set off some flashing lights, some alerts when they upset Clemson. Clemson ended up not being nearly as good as what we thought they were going to be. I've been impressed with what Duke has been doing this season. Like I like Riley Leonard a lot. And I know we're gonna touch on this here in a second about his pre-injury versus post-injury stats, but I was honestly really shocked that the offense just could not get anything going this game.
Yeah, I'm bouncing off that point about the pre-Riley Leonard injury. So on my stat sheet I have there, pre-injury Duke yards per game, averaging 195 yards per game. Post-injury, only 108 yards. Now, granted, they have a very two tough games after the injury with Florida State and Louisville, a dominant team. But like Louisville's rushing attack, or not? Oh, excuse me. Let me go back a little bit. Duke's defense has not lived up to the hype,
No,
in my
definitely not.
opinion. And when they've faced some top 25 teams, they have what I say folded. So Louisville's rushing attack coming off of a heartbreaking loss against Pitt. They should not have lost that game, in my opinion. They definitely didn't play to their capabilities. They only had 86 rushing yards against Pittsburgh. Against Duke, they had 163 yards. So I don't know what Louisville did to expose this Duke defense. Maybe they saw some Florida State film, maybe they saw some other film or saw something that we didn't see. But Louisville absolutely demolished Duke's defense in the run game.
Yeah, and that with a defense that was as highly like touted and ranked coming into the season with Duke, it was shocking to see them not be able to stop the run at all. They had 234 all-purpose yards on the ground, sorry, rushing yards on the
Yeah.
ground against Duke, which is just absurd. Like in comparison, Duke had 51 yards. It's just it's night and day, and especially with how their defense looked coming into this season, what they were going to do, I was shocked.
So you have on your stat sheet Riley Leonard going 9 for 23.
9 for 23, one interception, 121 yards. That's 39.1% completion. The past 2 weeks though, I mean, the past 3 weeks really, but the past 2 weeks have been significantly worse than what he had before it. Last week against Florida State, he was 7 of 16 for 69 yards, the 43.8 completion percentage. That's 4.3 yards per attempt, and then this week 5.3 yards per attempt with an interception in both games. This week he got sacked 4 times as well. Like you're not winning games like that
And what I think why he's getting sacked so much is definitely like the injury. Like
for
we're gonna
sure.
talk about this. We're gonna talk about this so much because it's such a big factor. The one thing Riley Leonard really had going for him before this injury was his mobility, but
Yeah.
now he's forced to be a pocket passer and can't extend those type of plays. What does Duke do to like reverb that offense and get back into that groove?
I think they need to change their pass protections up a good amount here. I don't think their offensive line is nearly as good as what some people thought it was going to be. Because you can see him struggling in the backfield, especially when I was watching some of the highlights from this past week against Louisville. I mean, Louisville's defense is solid, but they're nothing to really talk a whole
Yeah.
lot about. And watching Riley Leonard just like struggle in the pocket this week, it was kind of shocking. He's gonna have to figure out how he can sit in that pocket or how he can work around this injury a little bit.
Mitch, can you look up something for me? Can you look up Duke's defense points per game? Because this was also a huge part. Because I'm pretty sure coming into either Notre Dame or Florida State, they were only allowing, what was it, like, what's that, Mitch?
Duke average points per game 72.
Defense points per game, Mitch.
Defense.
63.6.
Oh,
I think that's what that is there.
this
No,
one.
that's offensive point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, just look up defense. But I'm pretty sure they were only averaging something like 10 points per game or something. 24.5 points per game,
Yep.
which it's pretty good. And in all seriousness, if their defense is able to complement their offense like that, so say Duke's defense only gives up what, like 7 points to some team, and then their offense goes out and scores multiple scores.
Yeah, and we look at their past games here. I mean, 7 points against Clemson. Is this what is this? Yeah, Lafayette. 7 points against Lafayette. 14 against Northwestern. 7 against UConn. 21 against Notre Dame with a pretty good offense. So I mean, they've been pretty consistent this season. I mean, Florida State's kind of an outlier there with 38, but Florida State's offense is on a different caliber, I think.
For sure. I mean, Florida State, Notre Dame, and Louisville are all very explosive offenses,
For
and I
sure.
I think that's where the Duke defense really got shut down is that they had to play these explosive type of offenses with
Right.
Sam Hartman, Jordan Travis, and who's the quarterback for Louisville, Mitch?
Jack Plummer.
Jack Plummer. I
Yeah.
mean, they're all just explosive quarterbacks with very good talent around them, and it's hard to stop. And in all seriousness, their past three games have been against top 25 teams with top 25 offenses, in my opinion.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
I mean, it was definitely a challenge, and it definitely showed that Duke has something they need to work on. I mean, playing Lafayette, it was a good start. They had a good start, but now they just need a rebound off of this.
On the flip side of that, I think Louisville's a better team than their ranking right now as well. They got that one tough loss to Pitt, but I think they're an upper teens ranking. They got them ranked at 18, I think, right now. Is that where they stayed?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
No, they actually okay. So college football play put them up at 13.
Okay,
I think that's a pretty good ranking there because they've played some tough opponents and they've played some tough opponents well. I mean the one loss to Pitt last week. I think they bounced back well this week against Duke. On paper, a much tougher opponent. Pitt the Pitt loss is shocking, and I know you kind of touched on that last week because Pitt's abysmal this year.
for sure.
So seeing them kind of drop the Pitt was shocking, but I'm glad to see they bounce back this week.
And I mean, we've seen top teams struggle all year. Like Georgia struggled against some unranked teams, or not. It's not just about the rank; it's just the teams that
Right.
they should have absolutely dominated. We've
Right.
seen Florida State struggle against Boston College. 31-29 was the final score of that
Yeah,
game,
it's
which
crazy.
as a Florida State fan myself, should not even have been close
Right.
in that sort of aspect. So I mean, it's a crazy year for college football. Ever since Alabama has been taken down these past few years, it's just been anyone's game, in
Right.
my opinion. Anyone in the top four could win this national championship. Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, even Washington, for example.
Yeah.
Michael Penix Jr. having a Heisman sort of season. It's just college football has definitely changed. It's anyone's game at this point. Anyone can lose on any given Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you said about seeing these bigger teams kind of playing close games against some lower level Division 1 opponents is really kind of showing that.
Speaking of bigger teams not playing to their capabilities, Clemson versus NC State. Now, I don't know about you, but I had NC State with the W this week, which actually came in. Cade Klubnik is not it for the Tigers. While he threw for over 200 yards, he had two interceptions with zero touchdowns, which
Yeah.
ultimately cost them the game. I'm pretty sure one of them was a pick six as well.
Yeah, his QBR on the season right now, 58.8. He's
Oof.
73rd in
Oof.
Division 1 college football. I mean, if for Clemson to get back to that winning system that they had going for so long there, I don't think he's the answer either. I know last year he got some play. He wasn't seeing nearly as much play as what he's seeing right now. But this is a rough start for Clemson this year with Cade Klubnik.
So I just want to ask you a question. So Clemson has some very talented quarterbacks within this past decade with
Yeah, absolutely.
Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and DJ Ugalele. But DJ Ugalele transferred out this past season. Do you think that Dabo Swinney's offense changed drastically, or was it his talent leaving that hurt this Clemson offense?
I think it's been a little bit of both. Clemson's offense still seems to be running similar schemes to what they've previously done with some changes to the personnel that they have right now. But I don't think it works as well without the talent that they had before, and it really does hurt when you're coming in with a quarterback who was never really your starter last year. He just played
Yeah.
in some games for some garbage time or injury time. And trying to kind of shove them into a system. I think they're still kind of feeling out some of that. I'm shocked that they're not relying more on the run game than what they have been so far this season because I think they could possibly have a pretty solid rushing attack, and they showed it against NC State where they had their starting back had 16 carries I think for 84 yards and two touchdowns. Yeah, 16 carries, 84 yards, two touchdowns. So they're somewhat productive on the ground right now. They just got to figure out how they can integrate that into that passing attack without throwing the ball 50 times like they did this week. Because when you throw 50 times, you're bound to get some okay yardage stats on that, but two
Yeah.
interceptions is rough.
So Clemson's offense this season has looked absolutely terrible, but what about their defense? Their defense has is still one of the top in the nation,
Yeah.
in my opinion, at least. They've definitely held their own against some very tough teams. For example, Florida State at home came down to the last play in double overtime. They held their own against a very, very tough team.
Yeah, and if we look at their losses, minus like week one against Duke, which was a rough game, they're playing close games. Like we this past week it was a 7 point game. Week before against Miami, two overtimes, 8 point game. Their loss against Florida State in overtime, a 7 point game. Like they're playing their opponents tough, and I think their defense is a huge reason for that. They're keeping them in these games and keeping them competitive right now. So if they can keep that going forward and find some sort of winning strategy on offense, I think they'll be able to have a rise back to somewhat of prominence again.
Exactly. So like what I want to touch on is that like people say defense wins championships, but you need your offense to complement that. And if your offense isn't complementing your defense, there's only so much your defense can do to hold
Yeah,
out against like tough teams. Like for example, Florida State, Notre Dame, they're coming up. It's just
Georgia Tech right now, who's winning
Georgia
games.
Tech, they're
Yeah,
on fire.
I know they're winning games.
Yeah, Miami, they beat Miami in overtime,
Yep.
or actually no, it wasn't overtime. Miami should have kneeled the ball.
Yeah,
Shout
and
shout out Lynn Gingering.
one of the worst coaching decisions I've seen in a while.
Yeah, that was I cannot believe that
Me
they did
either.
not kneel. I mean, that's in the past, I
Yeah,
guess. But back to Clemson, their offense has definitely not complemented their defense to what it should be. I mean, they've had talent these past years, but I mean, it's definitely a down year. I'm pretty sure I saw Dabo Sweeney say in an interview they had over 80% of their team drafted or graduated. So I mean, it's definitely tough.
rebuilding.
I imagine they'll bounce back. I mean, maybe in a few years. I don't know about next year unless they bring in some legit talent. I haven't seen the recruiting class for the 2024, but I think Clemson just needs they're in full rebuild mode right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they have some good pieces in place right now. It's going to take them a little bit though, like you said. I don't foresee next year them being a top 10 team.
Me
I can see
neither.
them being
Me neither.
ranked, but I think it's going to take them a couple of years to get back into those top 10 rankings.
Yeah, but that's all I have to say about Clemson. NC State, on the other hand, they've always proved to be a team that fights.
Oh yeah.
They fight. They always fight. Actually, Clemson actually lost to them. I forget what year it was. It was either last year or 2 years ago where they lost them in what was it? Double overtime or single overtime?
Yeah, Clemson was ranked high too. I think that was
Yeah,
2 years ago.
yeah. It was 2 years ago. Clemson was ranked one of the top teams in the nation. They were playing amazing ball with DJ Ugalele, but it came down to a heartbreaker. Clemson
Yeah,
lost on a touchdown pass from the NC State offense. So although they lost to an NC State team, the NC State team is always tough.
sure.
They always manage to show out against teams who they they play good as the underdog, is what I'm trying to say. They've always played good as the underdog, but yeah, Clemson just did not play to their capabilities, and they haven't been playing to their capabilities all season.
Yeah, and NC State even looking at their games this season. I mean, they had a tough loss to Notre Dame, but they played Louisville real close. We just talked about being pretty strong. Duke kind of gave it to them a couple weeks ago, but I think NC State, like you said, is a good fighting team, and they stand a chance in almost any game they play.
And again, that Duke team was different than it was the 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
You understand?
absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on to UNC versus Georgia Tech.
This is a shocking game too.
For sure. Once again, we talked on how Georgia Tech is on fire. But I want to say, USC this season is not good. They are the definition of a mediocre team. There was so much hype. I don't know if you heard the hype
Yeah,
coming into this season about the UNC Tar Heels and Drake May of UNC, the quarterback,
yeah.
being this star. They have not lived up to it.
No, and I think I think Drake May has played some good football this year. He definitely is not like a Heisman candidate, like some people wanted to
Oh
say at the
no.
beginning of the season. I think honestly, UNC's bigger problem has been their defense this year because offensively they've been scoring. If we look at some of their past games as well, they're scoring some points. Like we got opening week 31 points, next week against App State 40 points, 31 against Minnesota, 41 against Pitt. Like they're putting up a good number of points each game, but their defense is allowing so many points as well. And it's tough. We said earlier about defense winning championships. We need a competent offense. Well, right now we have a somewhat competent offense, but no defense whatsoever, and that's hurting.
And in my notes, I have Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, for example, a team who hasn't been what I would say relevant the
Yeah,
past few years,
yeah,
rushed for 348 yards
that's absurd.
on 48 carries.
I didn't actually see that stat. Now I need to get 348 yards. Wow.
348 yards. Almost almost over 350 yards of football was played on the ground for the Georgia Tech team, and also allowed Haynes King to go 23 for 30 with four
Touchdown.
touchdowns. Four touchdowns. That is crazy. Haynes King has played out of his mind these
Yeah,
last 2 weeks.
past 2 weeks have been awesome for him too. His completion percent. I mean, now his completion percentage against Boston College has not been great, but like
Oh
on the
no.
season, he's been pretty solid with what he's been doing. I mean, for a you talk about a mid to low tier ACC team here in Georgia Tech. I think they have themselves a good quarterback. He's a sophomore. His QBR right now in FBS is 27th overall. He's 21 touchdowns on the year to 10 interceptions. I think there's some talent there as well. But I mean, their rushing attack. I don't know if that was incompetence on UNC's part or if that's just the Georgia Tech rushing attack that we're going to start seeing now. But I mean, 348 yards on the ground with Dante Smith, their lead rusher, rushing for 178 yards is insane.
Mitch, can you look up for me how many rushing yards did Georgia Tech have against Miami? Because this will prove if the Georgia Tech rushing attack is legit as they say it are, or if it is just the Tar Heels defense. Because, like we said, it could either be that or it just could be the Tar Heels defense not being good.
And this was a tough game for them offensively too.
You know, maybe if you pull it up on your tablet, that might help.
Yeah, see if you can get rushing yards
Yeah,
for Miami.
no,
Two
for Georgia
for
Tech.
Georgia Tech, 129.
That's still relatively impressive for against the Miami Hurricanes, who have a relatively solid defense this year as well. I mean, 129 is not you're not breaking any records with that, but that's a strong showing.
No, but I want to say UNC versus Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech outscored the Tar Heels 22-7 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
So what I'm getting at here is UNC almost blew it, or kind of blew it, in my opinion.
absolutely. I mean, all of the scoring for Georgia Tech happened in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. They scored 24 points in the second quarter and 22 points in the fourth quarter. So like you talk about like limiting like explosive plays and stuff like that. Like UNC's defense is just getting run through it in two of the four quarters of the game.
For sure. And it's just like if you want to win these type of games, like UNC should be an amazing team. They have all the talent, they have everything they need to be a great team, but they're not living up to the hype like most teams in college football this year. Like most
Absolutely.
teams, even in the top 10, most teams in the top 10 are not living up to like Washington has struggled. All of these teams have struggled, but they have the talent. And whether it's the play calling or just the players not wanting to play, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this year more than ever, you're really seeing some of the, like we said earlier, some of these top teams start struggling. And you're not just only seeing it in the ACC. We're seeing that across, all five of our Power Five conferences. It's really interesting to see some of these lower teams also put a showing up against some of these like football giants that we would normally see in these Power Five conferences.
So we already touched on this on why UNC has played or played not well against teams like Georgia Tech, but I want to ask you, what can they do to rebound from such a loss, and do they still have a shot at the ACC championship game?
I think they do still have a shot. We're looking at, I think there are two losses now in the season. Is that right?
Yes, or yeah, it's two, I'm pretty sure.
Let me pull that game back up. Yeah, there are two losses on the season now. They still definitely have a shot here. This is going to hurt them. Next week they have an easy game, which is nice. They're playing. Who even is this? Campbell. They probably paid this college a couple $1 million to come play them. Um, So they should see a nice win. Yeah, their matchup predictor right now has them at a 99% win rate. So that'll be a nice game to kind of refuel your identity as a team, bounce back a little bit. Then they got to play Duke, who's been struggling. They got to play Clemson, who is not playing the best, and they got NC State, who always plays well. So I think looking forward in their season, they definitely have a shot, but they're going to have to really tighten things up on defense if they want to truly push that ACC title this year.
And it comes down to Louisville as well. Louisville still has a decent schedule ahead of them, and they need to definitely win out. Both teams need to win out
Yeah,
for sure. Louisville and UNC need to win out if they have any sort of shot.
absolutely.
My prediction is Florida State 100%.
Oh yeah,
They're going to make it to the ACC championship game. But what it comes down to right now is either UNC or Louisville.
yeah, and I think if we look back, let's take a look at Louisville's the rest of their schedule really quick. I think Louisville might have a tougher schedule going forward.
I think so.
Yeah, they got to play Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's not doing great this season, but they can put up some fight. Virginia really is rough this season, but then you got to play Miami, who is playing some solid football, and Kentucky as well. So they have a tougher schedule, I think, than UNC does. But I also think Louisville's got a little more talent. So I think we'll have to see how these next few weeks play out. If UNC can win out like it looks like on paper they should be able to do, I think they have a really good shot at playing Florida State in that title game.
Yes, sir. But I want to talk about this last game here, Kentucky. Kentucky, although being unranked, is still a very, very tough team.
Yeah.
They've and it showed this week against Tennessee. They fought. From what I thought, they fought this whole game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Tennessee's had its fair share of ups and downs this season, and this is a good segue into our SEC section here.
Yes, sir.
Um, but I mean, Kentucky's got fight in them. They've got fight all season, and you're looking at somewhat of a different system this year with you got no Will Levis anymore. And Will Levis showed up. Did you see that this week in the NFL?
Oh yeah,
Will
yeah.
Levis
With the
came
Titans,
in.
yeah.
Yeah, came in and played a really good game of football. So I mean, they had a quality quarterback and they're going to somebody who was their backup for so long. So it's going to be tough. But they played Florida really really well, beating Florida 33-14. Florida's a solid team this year. Had a bad loss to Georgia, but Georgia, in my opinion, is probably the number one or the number two team in the country this year. Losing 51-13 is rough, and that hurts. And then losing, I think, kind of in part that big loss, dropping to Missouri the next week as well. But they had a really great game against Tennessee, even though they lost. I think Mississippi State this week they have a good shot at beating them. I think we'll see them bounce back a little bit.
I just want to say kudos to Missouri this season. They have played off the wall
They
once
have.
once again. The Missouri Tigers, I covered them last week. I think they have played an amazing game. I mean, I know they have a tough matchup this week against number two college football ranked Georgia.
Yeah,
But I mean, I said this last week against Florida, so maybe my opinion doesn't matter as much. I think they can still put up a fight against the Bulldogs because the Bulldogs still have struggled. But coming back to the Kentucky Tennessee game. Joe Milton has had his ups and downs this year, for sure, 100%.
yep.
And I'm sure you can agree with me. But this game was not one of those downs. Milton was near perfect, only having three incompletions the whole game, going 18 for 21, 228 yards, and one TD, and averaging 10 yards per throw. What do they do to keep accessing this sort of talent from Joe Milton that is obviously shown?
I think making sure that you're running routes that are beneficial to him. I mean, you got Joe Milton who's a senior, but obviously he's not Hendon Hooker. He hasn't been in the system as the starting quarterback for as long. But I think giving him good routes, utilizing those wide receivers that you have, and getting easy routes for him to make easy completions to. I think you'll see him keep finding that success that he found this past week. This week was awesome. Like you said almost perfect. You said 18 for 21, three incompletions. That's awesome. Averaging 10 yards per throw and a touchdown. I think you keep utilizing finding the easy routes to get the ball to, and we'll see success from him going forward.
And with Kentucky, I want to say they were outscored 10-0 in the first quarter. I know that doesn't sound like much, but that's definitely huge as they won. Tennessee won by 6 points.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Tennessee is able to capitalize off of these errors from any sort of team.
Sure.
But it only comes down to whether Joe Milton, I want to say, decides, but whether he is able to play to this capability every single game. Because like we've said, Tennessee is 6-2 on the season, and I brought this up. Since last year's win against Alabama, they are 1-3 against SEC teams on the road.
Oh wow.
The only win coming against Vanderbilt,
And yeah, Vanderbilt's
baseball school to say
yeah
the least.
baseball school for sure. I think another thing that's gonna you're really gonna see help them here. And this was not to discredit Tennessee at all. This was a good win against Kentucky. But relying on the run a little bit more as well. And I think we saw that this week against Kentucky with Wright having 120 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Like being able to have that diversified offense a little bit more is going to really help Milton be successful in the air because when you got a defense worrying about the ground attack plus the air attack, like you're going to get open receivers from that.
Exactly. Like if you have if it's almost like how offense complements the defense.
Sure.
You need that run game to complement the passing game. And if you're able to continue to do that sort of dominance towards the end of the year, they might see their shot at almost. I want to predict. No, maybe I'm gonna say it right now. They may have a shot at a New York Six bowl, in my opinion.
I no, if they definitely if they win out, if we look at their schedule here, let's see what they got. Yeah, UConn, got to play a tough game against Missouri, got to play a real tough game against Georgia, and then Vanderbilt at the end of the year. I mean, if you beat Georgia or Missouri, and you lose to one, you beat the other one, and win out the rest of the way, going 9-3 on the season. I think you have a shot at a lower tier New Year's Six bowl or a high tier like maybe Outback Bowl or the Citrus Bowl, something like that, looking right out of New Year's Six. But I think they have some talent. It's been in spurts this year, but there's something there, and I think they can. I think they definitely got something to build on as well. But look like we said about defense winning championships, offense needing to complement that as well, and we comparing that to the passing game versus the run game. If you have a dominant run game, that's going to open up your passing attack like that. Your offense kind of feeds off that. Like you get the linemen involved in that. Everybody's kind of building off that to help the offense be more successful. I think just that momentum is going to be huge for them. They have to keep diversifying it.
Exactly. Those are some very good points. And I just want to ask you one more question before we transition into something else for this Tennessee team. Do you think they have a shot at the SEC championship game? Think about Alabama, Georgia. In my opinion, it's far, 100-yard bow shot, but I don't think that they got it this year, in my opinion.
It's going to be tough. I mean, they'd have to beat out. You'd have to be ranked above Missouri and Georgia, and I just don't see them ranking above Georgia, barring some sort of disaster of Georgia just falling apart. Which I don't foresee happening. The most falling apart that I've seen Georgia happen this year is them get ranked number 2 in the college football playoff poll instead of number 1. But I think they're a long shot out. I would 100% take Missouri before I would take Tennessee being able to win the SEC East.
And like I said, kudos to Missouri this year. They've had an amazing turnaround. I remember a few years back when Florida State was not having an amazing season. They played Missouri in a low tier bowl, and now look at them.
Right.
And I mean, it was definitely a long turnaround, and for the Missouri fans, they've suffered so much the past few years where they've just been almost irrelevant. So
Yeah.
kudos to that team because they've definitely shown out this year.
Yeah, and they're I mean they have a program moving in the right direction. I think you look back, 4 or 5 years to when they had Drew Lock there as their quarterback. I think you really started seeing something building in the right direction. And I think they're finally reaping some of the benefits of that. Ranked number 12 in the country, like there's nothing to be ashamed of.
So speaking of Tennessee's tough schedule, these next 2 weeks, Missouri, and then number 2, Bulldogs. We're going off college football rankings this week as they came out on Tuesday. So Georgia, not number 2, Buckeyes number 1.
Yes, that's
Georgia Florida game, not the game anyone expected, in my
no.
opinion.
A game that had so much hype coming into it too, and just Georgia to kind of roll over Florida the way that they did. Florida scored 7 points in the first quarter and then didn't score again until like garbage time in the fourth quarter. So like it was even though I mean you're looking at a 23-point difference at the end of the box score here, but it was not even that close of a game in my opinion. Florida just looked abysmal.
I agree. I totally agree. And in the swamp too. Now,
Yeah,
I'd compare it to the Clemson Tigers. The Tigers barely lose at home. They
right.
haven't lost at home since before this year. Before this year, they haven't lost at home in a very, very long time. I don't remember the exact date. But going into the swamp with one of the greatest SEC rivalries, in my opinion, getting blown out like that,
Yeah.
43-20. Carson Beck had 315 yards with 2 touchdowns, going 19 for 28 against this Florida defense.
And it made a lot of it look easy too. You watch any of the highlights from the game, like it looked like he was playing against almost like a high school team, and Florida just did not play up to the standard that I think they've set for themselves at the beginning of the year. And it wasn't even a huge turnover differential. I think Florida might have turned over the ball one time. Yeah, they lost one fumble on the game. So it wasn't like they were like turning the ball over and giving Georgia all these opportunities. They just could not stop Georgia. Georgia just ran it down their throat, threw it all over them all game. 171 total rushing yards in the game, 315 total passing yards. Like that's a productive offense.
So let's talk about this too. Georgia is out one of the best play, in my opinion, one of the best players in college football with Brock Bowers.
Yeah,
One of the best tight ends that college football has seen in a very long time, and they're still putting up these sort of numbers. Ever since this Kentucky game and after the bye, Georgia has been red hot
yeah.
in my opinion. Like they started off slow this season with struggling against some uh, lower level D1 teams. I don't know the exact names of these teams, but they have seen like this bye week that they had this past week. I don't know what they did. I don't know what Kirby Smart brought into them or what mindset he had, but Georgia is on fire.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I was shocked, like we said, everybody was at this Florida game. I'm really excited now for next week against Missouri because I think going into that game, that you're looking at if anybody's going to dethrone Georgia from that SEC East title, it's going to be Missouri. So that game right there is almost for the SEC East title, and I think Georgia's got a real shot. They're 15-point favorites going into the game. I think they got a real shot at kind of clinching this thing up right now in the season. And if they just keep, pounding the ball the way that they have, you're looking at your SEC champion right there.
All right, let's look at this. So Georgia started off the first two games decently easy.
Yeah.
With UTM, Ball
University of
State,
Texas Martin, I think. Is that right?
University of Texas Martin,
Yeah, UT Martin.
UT Martin, Ball State, UAB, then Auburn, and then this is where it starts to get tough. Kentucky, is that
Yeah,
Vanderbilt?
that's right.
Vanderbilt, Florida, but then next week with Missouri. After this, they have number 10 Ole Miss, and
And
Ole Miss is legit.
the Ole Miss is legit, and then they got Tennessee after that too. So you're looking at the next, 4 games that they have to play being tough games, and then they got to play Georgia Tech, who's been on fire in the last game of the season. That's a rivalry game for Georgia Tech, so I think they're going to come out. They're going to come out playing. Georgia's got a hard schedule, which is kind of why I was a little shocked to see them snubbed into number 2 here in the college football playoff because I think they've played some opponents a little bit tougher than OSU maybe has.
So, what I want to bring up is one more thing. Do you think Georgia has it to win it all this year? Do they make history this year and bring in the three-peat?
I think they honestly have one of the best shots of any team out there right now. They have the talent on the roster. Kirby Smart's doing a great job of running that offense and that offense really the way that it needs to be run with the talent that they have. I think you're going to see a really dominant Georgia team going into the playoffs in 5 weeks here. I don't foresee them. I don't foresee them losing to Missouri. I don't foresee them losing to Ole Miss. I don't foresee them. I see them winning out right now. So I think you're going to see a really really special Georgia team this year.
I truly believe that one of the only teams that could potentially dethrone this team is the Michigan Wolverines.
Absolutely, Michigan's defense is top notch. I mean, Big Ten football, you normally see a lot of really good defenses. It's kind of like what the Big Ten conference is built on. But this Michigan team this year is I thought last year's Michigan team was good. This year's team's better, and I think you're looking at your number 1 and number 2 teams right there. I think the AP people had it right. OSU's got talent. I think OSU though is probably the number 4 team, and I put Florida State at 3. Just based off of what I've seen this year, you look at like you talk about the stats, but then also like the eye test. Like I've watched OSU struggle in some games. I mean, they've played some tough opponents, but at the same time, like they've played some easy teams that they've played really really close. And at the end of the day, you're coming out with a win. But I'm not convinced they're as good as what people are making them out to be. I'm not convinced their new quarterback. What's his name?
Michigan.
No. OSU's
Oh, Kyle McCord.
Kyle McCord. Yep. I'm not convinced he's as good either. So I think you're looking at Michigan really being that team that's going to give Georgia a real run for their money in the playoffs.
So let's think about this. Last year, Michigan was out Blake Corum.
Right.
He comes back his next season is having an explosive season. He complements J.J. McCarthy well,
Yep.
which is one of the reasons why I think this Georgia defense is definitely going to struggle. These past 3 years, they've been easily the top defense that the college football scene has ever seen.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't compare. I don't know. It's a hot take, but comparing it to the 2000s Miami team
Sure.
is definitely not far from reach.
No, you're absolutely right. And they like you said, they've been dominant. They've been dominant the past 2 seasons. They're dominant this season. I think they got a real shot.
I mean, we hit it on the nail here. Moving on to our Big Ten segment. Speaking of Kyle McCord, he
Yes.
struggled. He has struggled these past 2 weeks.
He has. I mean, we look at the week before against Penn State. We got a solid defense there, but against Wisconsin, who has been playing some up and down games here. I was kind of shocked to see his stat line with 2 interceptions on it. He was kind of touted as a much more accurate passer than that coming into the season, so that was a little surprising.
I agree. I think after the Penn State game where he did not perform to his capabilities, he has definitely struggled. And maybe teams like Wisconsin have found out what they can do to pressure Kyle McCord and get him to make these mistakes and get him to turn the ball over. Granted, Ohio State won, but it was close at half, I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, going into the half, it was 10-3. So
Yeah.
like, you're playing a one score game going into the half against unranked Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's always a good opponent, but I mean, Ohio State, if we're going to rank them number one overall, they should. I feel like they should be a little more dominant against Wisconsin. The other point is I feel their offense is incredibly one dimensional and based on Marvin Harrison Jr.
For sure.
And he is bailing them out. This past game, 6 receptions for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. He caught the ball 6 times and gained 123 yards off of it, which
That's
is
insane.
absurd. And you look at the week before against Penn State, he was the reason they were so productive in the second half against Penn State. He finished that game with 11 receptions, 162 yards, and a touchdown. Like you're talking about your big playmakers, one wide receiver. So I think if a team can really shut him down a little bit, Kyle McCord's really going to start struggling because over half of his yards the past couple weeks have just been to Marvin Harrison Jr.
And I'm pretty sure I had some sort of, I was looking online the other day. I saw some teams had, or some people had Marvin Harrison at number 8 in the Heisman rankings, which I wouldn't say he's top 10, but he's definitely up there. Like, he's
100%.
having a phenomenal season. He had a phenomenal season last year, but
Yep.
this year he is going off the wall once again.
And his draft stock is just shooting up from that too. I think we're going to see him go high in April here in the draft.
And what will Kyle McCord do without him is the real
Exactly.
question. Like, what are the Buckeyes going to be with, say, he goes down? What's going to happen? They're going to have to rely more on Trayvon Henderson, Julian Fleming, and other wide receivers that haven't really seen much action this
Yeah.
season.
And you look, I just pulled up the stats here for OSU receiving this season. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. with 889 yards. The next closest receiver is actually their tight end, Cade Stover, who's at 429 yards. So less than half of what Marvin Harrison's had. So he's half of their production right now through the air on offense. 48 receptions on the season, averaging 18.5 yards a reception, 8 touchdowns. Like he's dominant right now. Easily, in my opinion, the number one and number two wide receiver that you're going to see going into the draft this year.
So we say shut down Marvin Harrison. It's so much harder than that because
Oh
he
yeah,
is an explosive player. He torches defenses either with these short routes, with these this mix of long routes, mix of even juking defenders out. It's hard. Like
absolutely.
going up against the son of a top NFL talent. It's definitely going to be tough. Not and just saying it should be on paper. It should be just shut him down. You can't just do that with a player like him.
And you look last week against a defense like Penn State's, which was limiting every. Now, granted, they didn't have a ton of super hard opponents going into that game, but they were limiting the air attack so heavily. And just watching Marvin Harrison Jr. just easily rack up 11 receptions and 162 yards, 2 touchdowns against them. Like I think that was huge, and just showing how dominant of a player he truly is, and why this Ohio State team is as good as it is this year through the air. It's so hard to cover him.
And once again, Penn State struggling. Last week against Ohio State, we saw it the whole time. One
Yep,
for 16 on third downs.
absurd.
I forget what Drew Alar had in
It
his
was his
completion rate. It was abysmal.
lowest of the year. I think he was under 50%.
It was under 50% for sure.
Yeah, 18 of 42.
That
Yeah,
is
not good.
sorry, Penn State fans, if you're listening to this. It's just been like Penn State has folded in these games, in the big
Yeah.
games, and they have folded in these games for the past decade. And I don't think James Franklin is still the guy to get them there. And I'm gonna continue to say this until he wins.
Yeah, and Now, some of the blame gets pulled off of James Franklin a little bit because he's not calling the plays now. But Pat Urich, on their offense, like I had much higher expectations. I saw Penn State grad. I'm a Penn State grad. I love Penn State football. I've gone to every single Penn State football game that I could for the past 6 years of my life, being in the blue band, just getting to travel with the team and everything like that. And just watching Pat Urich come in here and in these big games and not be able to run an offense has been embarrassing. Like especially with some of the talent that we have, getting the recruits that we've gotten for both our running backs and our quarterback prospects, it's been tough to watch. And against Indiana of all teams this past week, like looking at taking them really into the final quarter of the game, we're tied up into the final minutes of the game, tied up. It's just offensively they have to be a lot better. The defense is keeping them in games, but the offense has got to find some sort of a spark.
Granted, Drew Alar had an amazing bounce back game this week. He had 210 yards with 3 touchdowns and only 1 interception, going 20 for 31. But they still need something else to complement that.
You 100%.
28 of these points came from Drew Alar's touchdowns. Where's the run game?
Right. And you talk about like we talked a second ago about getting good recruits. So you got Katron Allen and you got Nick Singleton in the backfield there for Penn State. Both of these guys highly recruited. Both of these guys coming into the season, I saw all kinds of analysts putting them as both top 10 running backs in college football this year. And I think a lot of it has to do not necessarily with their talent, but just the play calling. We're not seeing a lot of good play calling
Oh,
to
for sure.
really utilize the strength of these
For
guys.
sure.
And that again falls really ultimately back on James Franklin, but also on Pat Urich right now and the offensive style that he's running. I think at the end of the day they need to really consider, and this is definitely a hot take, but looking at backup quarterback Bo Prabula over Drew Aller, and I think he just complements the offense a lot better. Bo Prabula is a much more RPO style quarterback. He's a dominant runner. He's still an accurate passer. He's a big guy. Um, if Drew Aller would have regressed this week, I would have been a lot harder on that take. But seeing Drew Aller kind of bounce back a little bit, I'm still confident that he's going to be a really good prospect and a good passer. I just don't think the team's built around him to be successful.
So Penn State has Maryland next week. Do you think you're going to see the same sort of struggle once again?
Penn State historically has always played down to their opponents. Maryland's fake good, I think, this year. I'm sorry if there's any Maryland fans out there. I don't think they're as good as what their record shows. Especially like they lost to Northwestern, I think, this past week.
Did they?
Like, which is
I
yeah,
think they did actually. I think I remember seeing that.
which like Northwestern is just awful.
Abysmal.
Yeah, they lost 33-27 to Northwestern.
Ooh.
They lost to Illinois the week before. Illinois is a
Oh.
little bit better than usual this year, but I mean they're still 3-4. Like I think Maryland, that's their two losses or three losses. OSU is the other one. They put it to Indiana, but Indiana's not very good. They put it to MSU, but MSU is not very good. Put it to Virginia, and then a couple cupcake teams at the beginning of the season. I think Penn State will have a relatively dominant performance against Maryland, but I'm also not going to be shocked to see them play a close game because they always do play down to their opponents.
That's for sure. Now, moving on. Our game of the week, USC versus California. My headline here is the USC defense is absolutely horrible.
They are
And
horrible.
I will continue saying this until Alex Grinch is fired. But this comes into my Lincoln Riley play. He is too ignorant to get rid of him. He is way too ignorant to get rid of him. And I am very passionate about the downfall of USC because everyone says Caleb Williams this, Lincoln Riley this, Lincoln Riley that. They are not the team everyone says they are, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, but
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Caleb Williams hype at the beginning of the season was way overdone. Caleb Williams is a talented player.
for sure.
And I think he's going to see success at the next level as well. But I'm not even convinced that he's the best quarterback in college football right now.
Oh, no.
Like I can think of a couple players that just have the better technically, better stats wise this season. But you're absolutely right when you say the USC defense is horrible, letting up 49 points to a 3-5 University of California team. Like that's just abysmal. California on the season, do we know how many points they were averaging?
I don't know, but I know that California has not been relevant since the band ran onto the field on the final play of that game.
It's very true.
But like you said, once again, Caleb Williams having not a season that I would consider a Heisman season. He went 23 for 40 on this game, barely over 50%, but he threw for 369 yards, and that came with the more high-scoring offense
Right.
that this game has. I think pretty sure it came up to a total of 99 points combined with both teams.
Yeah, 99 points with both teams. Your over under is insane if you're looking at the odds for this game. Um, but like he's Caleb Williams with how much he's touted to be such a great quarterback prospect. You're looking at a guy who should be making a lot more plays than what he's making. And against the game against Utah, like I think the stat is he's never beat Utah. Is that
No,
right?
0-3 against
0 and
Utah.
3 against Utah, which I mean Utah's a good team. Like nothing against Utah at all, but like if you're gonna make this guy up to be the greatest quarterback of this generation, like I would expect him to have a more productive performance last week than 24-34 against Utah, no touchdowns. Like you get this guy's your playmaker. He's got to be getting into the end zone.
So like that brings up my point. So this is what really, 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 really brings me back to my high school standpoint because I'm a high school kid. I'm talking college football. I'm talking about these guys who's making millions and everything, but that doesn't mean I can't express my opinion. I think Alex Grinch needs to be fired. 100%. 100%. And like I said earlier, Lincoln Riley's incompetence and ego won't get rid of this guy. You've seen this
Absolutely.
at Oklahoma. You've seen him have these 2, 3 lost seasons, but still having the same sort of hype coming in.
Right.
Will this ever change for him?
He's going to have to figure it out because USC is about to enter the Big Ten next year, and the Big Ten has some incredibly good defenses. You're not going to be playing against, Big 12. Big 12 is known for explosive offense, but you're not really
Bad
yeah,
defense.
not really anything good on defense. Going to the Pac-12, you have some teams that are a little more competent on defense with Washington and Utah. But going into the Big Ten next year, you're looking at 4 or 5 teams that have incredibly stout defenses, and you're not going to be able to get away with, just your explosive offense. You need something to keep you in that game. And if it's anything like what USC's defense has been this year, they're not going to be in the games. Teams like Michigan and Ohio State, like specifically, are just going to be able to dominate them because they're productive on both sides of the ball with everything they do.
Yeah, and if like we keep saying, this is our theme of the night. Defense complements offense, offense
Absolutely.
complements defense. USC has zero. They have nothing to go with their offense. It's just
Nothing.
their offense, one-sided. That's it. You shut them down. You shut the offense down. You shut the defense down, and that's it. There's
Yeah.
nothing else going for them.
And looking at Cal, like in this game, like they scored 2 touchdowns almost every quarter of the game. The only quarter they didn't score 2 touchdowns in was the third quarter. And that's how you get up to your 49 points like that. Like that's abysmal from USC's standpoint because California on the year, like they're averaging how many points? Let's see if we can see how many points they've averaged this year. 32 points a game, and that has been skewed now by this last game where they scored
Yeah,
49 points. Like their offense is not productive. They're 41% on third downs on the season. Actually, pretty effective on fourth down. Not great completion percentage on the season. Not a whole lot of yards overall. And They don't play a lot of really good teams. So, I mean, USC. I think this should be very eye opening if you're a USC fan and the defense that you have there.
and one final comment on this game. It came down to a 2-point conversion, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, it did. Um,
So California had a chance to tie it going to overtime and maybe possibly win. But I mean, if you're down by two and you're going against a top 25 team, I mean, I don't blame them going for two. I
no,
mean,
you get out of there with the win
yeah.
if you can. I mean, you you take them all the way to the end. There's 58 seconds left. You score a touchdown. Go for the two because I mean you're 3-4 at that point. USC 6-2. Like if you can steal that win, you steal that win. So
I mean,
I don't blame that play call at all.
so finally, I want to move on to our predictions for this week.
Sure.
So we're going to do 3 ACC teams, 2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams, and some other fun games that I thought would be a nice complement to what we have. First off, Louisville at Virginia Tech. I have Louisville winning by 14. What do you say?
I think you're pretty accurate there. Virginia Tech's gonna play a tough game against Louisville, I think, but I think at the end Louisville's offense is just gonna come out and be much stronger. So I would say Louisville by at least 14.
I agree with that. Next one up on the list, number 12, Notre Dame at Clemson. Now, I brought up earlier how Clemson is very hard to beat in Death Valley, but Clemson is still not it this year. As we said before, I have Notre Dame beating them at home by 17.
That's a big point differential there. I think you're right. Notre Dame's going to come out of Death Valley with that win next week. Notre Dame's offense this season is very strong. I think it's going to be Notre Dame probably by I'm going to say 7. I think they're
Yeah,
going to play. I think Clemson's going to play a closer game at home.
I can agree with that. They've always played well at home. Like I said, they haven't lost a home game before this year in a couple of years, I
Right.
imagine. This is Dabo Sweeney's first time losing back-to-back games in 2011, since 2011. So, I mean, I can see I can see it going either way at some point, but I still think Notre Dame's going to come out with the W.
For sure.
Finally, for our ACC prediction, I have Georgia Tech at Virginia. Virginia by 3.
Oh, you got an upset here.
I do have an upset.
Virginia by 3. So Virginia's an interesting team this year because I thought they were going to be a little better than they have been. Georgia Tech though, also an interesting team, and they're on fire right now. I think if you would have asked me a week ago, I would have had Virginia winning this game, but I think I'm going to take Georgia Tech in a close one. Georgia Tech by 7.
That's decent. I mean, I was just thinking on how Virginia Tech, or not Virginia, Virginia played last week or the week before against Miami.
Yeah, very good game.
Yeah, very good game. Coming close. Virginia, I'm pretty sure Virginia came out with a win, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Virginia came out with a win. I imagine they're able to build off this momentum and coming out home and beat Georgia Tech by 3. Now into our SEC segment for our predictions. Our SEC game of the week. I have 14 because this was made with the AP pool. Number 14, Missouri. Number 1, Georgia Bulldogs. Missouri on fire. Great team this season. Going into the Bulldogs' home territory, I don't think that they can come out with a win. I have Bulldogs by 10. I think it's going to be too tough for the Missouri offense at the Dome, at the Georgia Bulldogs home. So I just think Georgia's are going to take it away.
Yeah, I think Missouri's going to play a tough game. Missouri's going to play very strong against Georgia, but at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think Bulldogs by 10 is a good estimate there. I see here that the betting odds has Georgia as a 15 and a half point favorite. I think that's a little high. I think Missouri's a better team than that, and they're going to play them as such.
Moving on to our next prediction, Arkansas versus Florida at the Swamp. Arkansas having a terrible season once again. I'm pretty sure they just fired their offensive coordinator
It did.
after he had a dispute with one of the students or something.
Yeah,
What a crazy story.
they're a mess right now in Arkansas. I feel bad for a lot of those players right now. I think you're right. Florida by at least 14, if not more. I could see Florida really opening that game up, especially against another SEC opponent there.
And once again, it's in the Swamp, and in the Swamp, the fans are insane there. It's like any other. I'd compare it to Florida State's Doak Campbell Stadium.
Yep.
It's a very very strong football environment at that school.
Yeah, one of the best environments in college football.
Oh, for
sure
sure.
in the Swamp.
Moving on, our Big Ten segment. Number 3, Ohio State going to Rutgers. Ohio State's going to have a bounce back game. They're going to go into the Rutgers home territory, and I have the Buckeyes beating them by 21. Kyle McCord is going to go. Uh, I want to say he wouldn't be less shaken up, but definitely going to look better than he has the past 2 weeks. He's going to look a lot better. So Buckeyes by 21.
Yeah, I think we're gonna really see a good game from Ohio State here. But Rutgers this year has also been playing a little better than previous Rutgers. I think they are gonna be able to stand up a little bit more to their Big Ten East rival here in Ohio State. I'd like to see Kyle McCord spread the ball around a little more, not necessarily hit Marvin Harrison Jr. on everything. So I got Ohio State by 17.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it like that. I took Buckeyes by 21 because I think that they're going to get the run game down. Next up, number 9, a lot of your favorite teams. Penn State at Maryland. We talked about this earlier. Penn State having these struggles. I think that they're going to continue to struggle a little bit. They're going to come out with the win, but Maryland just has not been an amazing, phenomenal team this year. So I think the Nittany Lions are going to take it by 10.
Yeah, I think we'll see Drew Aller have a little more competence in a road game. So far on the road, he's been struggling a little bit. I think this is the game where we really see him kind of pick things up and regain control of this offense again. So I'll take Nittany Lions by 10.
So one of my favorite or my favorite game of the week, number 17 Air Force at Army. Now, Air Force has been phenomenal at running this triple option. I'm pretty sure
Absolutely.
they've been averaging less than 10 passes a game this season, which is just crazy for a team that's ranked in the top 25. I don't think they're as high as they should be. I'm pretty sure in the college football rankings they're dead 25,
Yeah,
which I think is decent, which is good for them.
yeah.
But I think that they're gonna beat Army by 14, and I have a little over under. I think Air Force is gonna attempt under 10 passes against Army.
I can absolutely see that. I could take an over under 10 passes on the entire game. I think we're going to see an incredibly dominant run game by Air Force, and I think they're gonna take it over Army. I'd say by at least 14. It'll be a fun game to watch though. I'm excited to see Air Force doing as well as they've been doing this season. It's cool to see a triple option team like that be able to be so successful.
Not only that, they're just a triple option team, they're a military team. I'm pretty sure this is the highest ranked a military team has been
In years.
in years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever, but I know it's been a very, very long time since a military team has been ranked this high.
Yeah.
And game of the week for 11/4/2023, November 11th, 2023. Number 5, Washington at USC. Now, USC fans, they play in the Rose Bowl, but I don't think that USC can pull this out. I think after this week, USC is gonna go unranked. They're gonna take the loss to Washington. Washington's gonna move up in the polls. They're gonna convince the College Football Playoff Committee that they're a dominant team. I have Washington winning by 10.
Yeah, I agree completely with you. Washington's offense has been phenomenal this year. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but Michael Penix Jr. just kind of having a Heisman season here. Shocking seeing what he came from, a couple seasons ago in Indiana, kind of just being, a mid-tier quarterback, and now Washington, he's really showing up, and it's impressive to see. I think, like we talked about as well earlier, USC's defense is really going to struggle in this game, even though it's technically a home game for USC. I think it's going to be Washington by 14.
So that does it. Episode 2 of the Extra Points podcast, brought to you by the Montgomery Broadcasting team. We thank you all for coming in. Thank you, Mr. Trey Fox, once again for coming in. It was a pleasure having you.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you, Peyton. I appreciate
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'd love to have you back once again.
it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that does it for this podcast. Thank you all for listening.